Hello, everybody. Michael, the Librarian of Magic here, finding and cataloging the magic and pointing you to it. I'm back here for another installment of What's New on Disney Plus this week for the week of January the 15th through the 17th of January. I'm being redundant. 2020. And I will go ahead and tell you all of the different things that have been added, as well as details of the original content, just like I did last week, and keep continuing with the series in this format this way. So I got my notebook as always, and I'll jump right into it. Added this week to Disney Plus were the following series. There were several Nat Geo, National Geographic documentary series that were added this week. Um, Season 1 of America's National Parks, which highlights 8 different of our national parks in the United States. I'll definitely be checking that out at some point. I'm a huge fan of our national park system and try to visit as many of the units as I possibly can whenever I can. And it's always interesting to me to learn more about those. So I'm excited to watch that. Excuse me. Also added is a National Geographic documentary series, a full season or season 1 of Continent 7 Antarctica, which details how scientists live and study down in Antarctica and what the continent is like and the wildlife that lives there and so on. Would be of interest to you if you are interested in anything about Antarctica. I took a course in college on the history of Antarctica, which was very fascinating, and I imagine there will be some of those elements in this show, so I may have to check that out. Another National Geographic offering is season 1 of Dog Impossible, which is a show about a dog behavioral expert who is helping to rehabilitate some dogs with behavior issues. It's just one of those, like, you got problem dogs and there's a guy who is really good with dog behaviors and goes in to help out sorts of shows. And then finally, in the National Geographic lineup, one season of a documentary show called Wild Russia, which looks very interesting to me as well. I haven't checked that out yet, but is all about the different wildlife in the vast country of Russia. It's so big that there are so many different habitat zones and different types of wildlife that can live there, and that series documents all of that. So that'd be interesting to watch at some point. In addition to the National Geographic offerings, the seasons 2 and 3 of the Marvel Superhero Adventure shorts have been added. I checked out a couple of those, and they're pretty fun. It's sort of like super silly oriented, very short superhero adventures with your favorite Marvel characters. And yeah, they're just very comedic and in nature. So those are kind of fun if you just want to see something super light, super short, that's Marvel oriented. Check those out; they're really fun. In a similar way, from the Disney Junior line of things, Disney has added season 1 of Muppet Babies Show and Tell to Disney Plus, which is what it sounds like. It's each episode or each short is one of the different Muppet Babies doing a show and tell of something from their nursery or objects that they care about or whatever. So that looks really fun. It's for the youngest viewers. It's like for really little kids, but if you think the Muppet Babies are cute and adorable, you may enjoy just watching it anyway. Um, so that's on there now. Seasons 1 and 2, which I think are the entire run of Randy Cunningham Ninth Grade Ninja, which is a animated Disney Channel show that ran, I think, like in 2012 to 2014, something like that. This one actually looks pretty fun. I may check it out at some point. The animation style looks really fun. It looks kind of silly, almost like maybe some of the same people who worked on Gravity Falls worked on this, or it's got that similar sort of vibe that's like similar sort of sense of humor. So I may check that out. And then a Disney Channel teen show called The Lodge. They added season 2 of The Lodge. I don't know anything about that. I'm not sure when it ran exactly, but it looks sort of like a teen style drama, like like a, I don't know, High School Musical without the music, or kind of thing, about a lodge where people go work. I don't know. It was hard for me to discern what the show is even about, but I know that it's like a teen romance drama type of situation that ran on the Disney Channel. I didn't catch it in its any original incarnation or run, so I don't know that much about it. But if that's something that you're a fan of or something you know about, season 2 has just been added to Disney Plus. So those are the shows that were added this last week to Disney Plus. In terms of original content, um, pick of the litter this week, there's a new episode called Meet Your Match. And I think this is probably the best episode of the series so far. We're finally getting to the point where some of the dogs are graduating through the guide dogs program and getting paired up with actual blind people. Some of the ones that they have followed throughout some of the earlier episodes of the show. A woman named Ava, a young lady named Kendall, and another young lady named Claire from various places in the country. They're all hoping to get paired up with guide dogs. Ava and Kendall have never had a guide dog before, and Claire is this will be her third dog. But they go through they go through the final testing. There's sort of a comprehensive final for the 3 dogs that have sort of made it this far. If we remember, there were 6 dogs originally. Raffi was given to another trainer before the program began to see if he could eventually make it back in at some future date. Amara was being considered as a breeding dog, and then that didn't work out, so she may also be added back into the pool to be a guide dog at a certain date. Then during the intensive trainings, Pacino was handed off to a master trainer to see if they could get him up to snuff, and they show a little bit of him in this episode working with the master trainer, and he seems to be improving, but that's sort of where they leave it off, and we may find out more about him in future episodes. Then the rest of this episode really follows the other 3, Tartan, Tulane, and Paco, as they finish their way through the program, and they end up going through this comprehensive final. They have 5 tests in a row where they sort of have to show everything that they've learned in this 12-week intensive program, which, by the way, is pretty remarkable that these dogs are really getting up to snuff in 12 weeks to be able to, do what they need to be able to do as a career as a guide dog. The first phase of the comprehensive test is guide work, in which they are just sort of generally walking around on the sidewalks, encountering other dogs, obstacles like trash cans, whatever, just very general walking down the sidewalk stuff. The second hurdle of the final exam is buildings. They take them to a mall where they have to go up and down escalators, and they're around busy places where people are shopping or stuff like that. The third test is obedience. They go to a set-up room at the Guide Dogs Training Center, and they have to be able to follow commands in there very specifically. One of them is a sit and stay test, where they have to be commanded to sit and then stay, and they have to sit and stay position for a full minute while they're being distracted by other dogs coming in and out and stuff like that. And all of the 3 dogs in question pass all of those. The fourth test is for traffic, where they have to go out and deal with cars and all of that sort of stuff. And this is where they test them for intelligent disobedience, where they're getting a command from the handler, but they have to know when it's okay to disobey because there might be cars or stuff in the way, and all of the 3 dogs do fine with that. And then finally they do a sidewalk list test, where if there are areas where a person needs to walk without a sidewalk, like along a roadway or something like that, the dogs know to sort of like hug the curbside of the road, but then stop when they encounter cars and stuff like that may be parked on the street and things like that. They all did pretty fine, or pretty well with that too. Paco needed some redirecting with that. You didn't get it on first blush, but with a little bit of help, he was able to learn what he was supposed to do. And so all 3 of them passed their final hurdles to get through. So then the next phase of everything is they bring in all of these people to be matched up with dogs, and we see these 3 women come in, Ava, Kendall, and Claire, and they end up getting paired with the dogs that just graduated. Claire is paired up with Tulane, Ava is paired up with Apaco, and Kendall ends up paired up with Tartan. And then once that happens, they're sort of there in a guest room for an intensive stay when the new clients come in to receive their dogs. They're there for like 2 weeks of sort of an intensive getting to know their new dog, having trainers there on standby to help them get accustomed to using it, especially if they're first time dog owners or this is their first guide dog. And then, just bonding with the dog, those things that need to happen because you're dealing with a live creature that needs to bond with a human in order to be successful. So some of it is just staying there, being present, being with the dogs and stuff. And that's kind of what the rest of the episode is about, is, these three meeting their dogs and starting to get accustomed to them and going out and walking with them and stuff like that, and them and the dogs getting used to each other. So this was a very interesting episode because it just showed a lot more about the program, and I've been waiting for the phase when they start meeting up with their the people that they're going to be with, and how they're getting used to each other and how that's working out. So I enjoyed that aspect quite a bit of this episode. So yeah, it was a decent episode. There's no more Forky Asks a Question. I think they're wrapped up on that for the season. Maybe they'll come back with some more of those in the future, or maybe not. But no new Forky Asks a Question this week. On the Marvel Hero Project, the episode was called Thrilling Toccata, and it was about a young woman named Toccata who is Lakota, and she lives up in Standing Rock, which is like in the border of North and South Dakota. And she is become an activist for indigenous peoples and the peoples in her community. She was one of the sort of active or leading figures in the Standing Rock sort of protest, sit-in, whatever you want to call it, when they were trying to build the Dakota Pipeline a few years back. And she's also gone to do advocacy marches and speeches and things like that in Washington. And then primarily, she's just really become concerned with, making sure that people in her community, people of her background, can feel like they have a voice and feel like they have, accurate, positive representation, things like that, to show, that they're regular people that are happy and fun and stuff like that, and not always just poor or downtrodden or struggling, or like those things exist too, but there's so much more to her people group than that. And she's just an impressive person that really cares about telling her story, telling the story of her people, telling the story of her place, and just making sure that is continues to be repeated the way that it has been for thousands of years. That the people that were her ancestors, she's descended from a great line of storytelling people, a storytelling tradition, and that those stories have been told over and over and over again throughout the generations, and that she feels very strongly about continuing to do that. Just makes her really inspiring in a time where it's, in the past century or century and a half, where it's become harder and harder to do that for a whole host of reasons. That those identities, when they feel like they're slipping away and things like that, and she's holding very tightly onto those and continuing to try to pass those on. It's very admirable, and she gets inducted into the Marvel Hero Project. And this one was really cool too because they detail a little bit more about the comic. And each one they draw a comic book starring the young person as the hero. And this one's no different. But what's kind of cool about this one is they took one of the traditional Lakota stories that she's very fond of, and incorporated that into the comic book itself, because one of her, the highlighted superpower in her comic book is storytelling, and they incorporate this story. I want to say it's called No Moccasins, and they incorporate that into, and they sort of detail a little bit about how they decided to do that, what their thought process was in coloring it and drawing it and trying to be sensitive and accurate and all that stuff. It's very interesting. So another great episode of Marvel Hero Project. Disney Family Sundays, the craft of the week is a Hercules obstacle course, and this is extremely involved. There's a lot of um, materials and work, but it does turn out to be pretty cool. Basically, it ends up being a like bullseye that sort of looks like a tree trunk, and then you build these swords that you can throw at it to try to like throw at the target thing. It's really cool if you're like a fan of Hercules and you want to do something involved that would get the family active. Probably for older kids because not only is there a lot of like cutting and things that you would want older kids or kids with supervision to do, but the finished product is like you're basically throwing swords around, so you wouldn't probably want very small kids to be chucking around cardboard taped swords. But yeah, it's pretty cool. There's just a lot to it, so know that going in if you are interested in following these things. The Hercules obstacle course on Disney Family Sundays. High School Musical, the series, of course, wrapped up last week. They had their season finale. But this week, one kind of cool feature, if it's something that you might be interested in, they added onto the originals section of Disney Plus. They added the entire season of High School Musical, the series, again, the entire first season, but it's a sing-along version of the entire season. So you could watch, if you wanted to, you could watch the entire run of the first season in sing-along version, where when the songs come up, there's words you can follow along with and sing along with it so that you know the songs. So if you're a really big fan of the music, or if you're a really big fan of the series and you want to watch the sing-along version of it, that is available for you to be able to watch. Encore this week turned out to be my favorite episode of the entire series by far. It highlights a cast of Anything Goes from Los Angeles High School in Los Angeles, California from 1975. And there's so many reasons why this is great. First of all, Anything Goes. I know this musical. It's one of my favorites. I really like it. It's fun, funny. The music, Cole Porter music, is awesome. I've gone to see it before. It's really great. Secondly, 1975 was a while ago, 44 years ago. So everybody that's returning to perform in this show is in their 60s now. So they're quite a bit older than any other cast that's been on the show, but it's really, their age isn't really so much of a factor, and it's very impressive that it's not. Anything Goes is a perfect show for them to be doing because these folks are game for anything. But it is a challenging one. They point out some things as they go along. Anything Goes involves a lot of specific choreography. Like there's a big tap dance number at the end of it, so everybody has to tap. And that's an interesting thing. Some of the people are comfortable with it, and some of the people aren't. And of course, with their age and everything like that, but they all do an awesome job at it. So there's one guy that ends up getting a major role when he only had a bit role back in the day, and there's lots of lines to remember, which is another thing they bring up in this. So Anything Goes back in the 80s was revived on Broadway, and it like won a Tony for best revival and stuff like that. But when they revived it, they sort of reworked the book, what they call the book, which is like all of the script, the words, to be slightly more concise. So this was originally written like back in the 30s, and back in those days, there was a lot more script usually for stage productions or musicals or stuff like that. And so the original version had a lot more lines to memorize for all of the actors. And back in 1975, before they performed it before the revival, that was the original production. That was what the cast originally did. So they in this episode of Encore, they're doing that original one because that's what they're familiar with. But there's like tons of lines that they have to remember and memorize, and particularly for the guy who is taking on a role he never even did before, this is more of a challenge, and they sort of let them get away a little bit more with requesting for lines and having offstage help when they need it, even during the night of the show, because it's unreasonable to have them memorize that much dialogue in 5 days time or something. And it actually creates for some like a pretty funny production. They improv very well when they can't remember lines and stuff like that, and they just sort of roll with it because it's such a funny, fun-loving group that's, like I said, they're just up for anything. And they just, when they can't remember lines and stuff like that, even on the night of, they just roll with it, and they stay in character and they stay in the scene and they just have fun with it, and it really turns out well. It just makes it really great to watch. And this whole episode from beginning to end is just joyful. It's just a total joy to watch. I had so many laugh out loud moments, and they're such a fun group. Um, they're so funny, and they're so just genuine and having a great time with everything that's going on. I just really, really liked this episode a lot. And if you've been a fan of this show at all, I just would highly recommend this one. If I was trying to, like I've said in previous episodes, if I was trying to advertise this show or explain it to somebody who'd never watched it before, I would encourage them to watch this specific episode because it's really fantastic. The world, according to Jeff Goldblum, this time he investigates the world of pools, swimming pools, to be exact. He wants to know why we love swimming so much and why we love swimming pools. He goes to a water park at one point to sort of investigate why we like those things, water slides and thrill rides and wave pools and all of that kind of stuff. He also goes to like a floating neurological assessment deprivation chamber, water deprivation tank thing, and stays in one of those things for like 45 minutes. And he finds out that he has a similar mindfulness ability that there's like a neurology expert that analyzes his brain waves, and he basically tells him like he's only ever seen a similar mindfulness sort of presence, brain activity of presence in like Tibetan monks, basically. So, it sort of confirms that Jeff Goldblum, as many of us have believed, has the presence or ability to a certain extent of a Zen master. And then also he goes to Houston, to NASA, to go see the facility where they have like a big thing built under a giant pool to mimic the International Space Station, where they train astronauts who are planning on going to stay in space for long periods of time. And they talk about how water can be used to help train the astronauts. And that's all very interesting as well. So there's some really cool segments in this. It's probably not the strongest episode of the show, but it's still really fun. Just falls in line with the rest. So that was The World According to Jeff Goldblum this week. And then finally, or not finally, actually. So in the One Day at Disney shorts, this one highlights a character designer, animator, or not an animator, but an artist for Walt Disney Company called Jose Zelaya, who I corrected myself because he's not actually a person who animates. He's a person who draws and does the initial character designs for new characters for animated shows and stuff like that with Disney. He's worked on the Lilo and Stitch show. He got his start working on the animated show Recess back in the late 90s, which is a really fun show that I used to watch. And he's worked on like the Lion Guard and several other animated shows. But it shows his background is very interesting. As a young boy, he grew up in El Salvador, and his mom immigrated to the United States to help give her children opportunities. She came to the United States and worked for a couple of years and established herself, and went through all of the whole immigration process before finally sending for her kids a couple of years later. So when he was a child, he had to live without his mom for like 2 years. But when he was very young in El Salvador, he was inspired by cartoons that he saw, and eventually saw a documentary about Disney animators, and he realized that that was an actual job. And he told his mom that one day he wanted to work for Mickey Mouse, and she said, "Okay, you'll do that one day." And when she immigrated and helped her family move to the United States, he eventually kept working on his drawing and went to college at an art school, and his portfolio was eventually reviewed by Disney, and he was hired, and he got to call his mom one day and tell her that he now works for Mickey Mouse, and that was a really special thing for his family and for him, and it's just really cool to see a success story like that, and also just to be able to see his work in this short little thing, to see some of the stuff that he's done and drawn, and some of the characters that he's designed and things that he's particularly proud of, and just seems like a really cool guy and a really talented person. So it was actually a really interesting little short to watch this week. And I thought I was done, but I'm not. I remembered there's a new show on Disney Plus this week, a new original that I watched the first episode of, called Diary of a Future President. And it's a pretty cool little show so far, I mean, in one episode. The idea behind it is it starts out with showing a woman who has just become president, named Elena, and she, at the beginning, she's in the Oval Office, and she's just become president, and her mom sends her diary to remind her, I know you're starting out as the president, but I want to remind you where you came from. And then it flashes back to her time in middle school when she started writing the diary, and that's the basis of the show, that we see her growing up from, I think, sixth grade on, and it's her journey as to how she becomes president eventually. Or at least we know that's sort of the bookend of the show. We know she's already become president, and then it sort of flashes back to see where she came from, what her background is, and stuff like that. And it's fun and funny. She has an older brother, and her mom, when they start out the show, they explain that she lost her dad a few years back, so it's just a family of three. The mom is played by Salinas Leyva, who is a great actor. She played Gloria Mendoza on Orange is the New Black, if you were ever a fan of that over on Netflix. I enjoyed that show, and I thought she was a really great actor, and one of the standout actors in that show. And it's just great to see her pop up in this. And she plays the mom, and it's just she sort of has just a really funny presence. And a sort of one of the great characters of the show. And then the brother is sort of like kind of a space cadet out there, in his own world, kind of older brother. And then, of course, the young girl Elena is sort of a nebbishy, overachieving girl who is having all sorts of junior high problems that you have in middle school, with losing touch with certain friends and getting new friends and stuff about academics and all of that stuff. And it's very funny. The show has good actors and a very funny amount of conflict for the first episode. There's a whole B plot where mom is some sort of executive, and she's starting to date and fall in love with one of the guys at work, and she's nervous about him meeting her kids because, of course, she's a widow and she doesn't know how they'll react and stuff like that. And part of the show is her sort of trying to time out when she wants to introduce her boyfriend to her kids. So that's really that's sort of like a funny thing that happens with that. And yeah, and then it's just sort of an interesting middle school slice of life comedy. And I enjoyed the first episode of it. I'm interested to see where it goes. It gets bookended at the end by having her, then you see her writing the diary entry that she was reading in the beginning of the episode while she's still president. And it sort of has people who are watching the show might not remember unless you're my age or older, but it sort of has the same kind of feeling as Doogie Howser had back in the day, where Doogie has an adventure during the day or whatever. He's learning stuff as a young doctor, and then at the end of the day he has a computer journal and he writes the lessons that he's learned in that little computer diary. Same sort of thing. She's writing in her diary at the end, and that sort of bookends it, where she was reading the entry in the beginning. If I had to guess, each episode is probably going to show a moment or a challenge that she's having as the new president of the United States, and then she'll read an entry in her diary, and then that'll flash her back, and then you'll see the episode, and then she'll write the entry at the end. But yeah, so far I really like the cast. I like the vibe of the show. I think it's really funny. It's very cutesy, but it's not saccharine sweet. It does deal with, like, there's a whole bunch of stuff in this first episode, jokes as well as serious beats that revolve around, like, girls getting their period for the first time and stuff like that. So it doesn't shy away from some of the things that you would encounter in junior high. But it also doesn't, like, it doesn't throw all that stuff in your face a tremendous amount either. There's a really nice balance to the humor and the drama of it, and so far, great episode, or great first episode. I'm interested to see where it goes. So that is everything that was added to Disney Plus for this week, originals and otherwise. I hope this video was informative and interesting and entertaining. If you're interested in seeing what was added to the service, I hope you got something out of this, or found a little bit of a nugget of something you were looking for here. Thanks as always for liking, commenting, subscribing, watching these videos and all of that stuff. Thanks as always for watching in general. And until next time, I hope you have an excellent week. I hope that it's a little bit magical if it hasn't been feeling that way. I hope things are looking up, and I hope this video was a nice little break for you to just check out and see what's going on Disney Plus. It was a nice little break for me to make it. That's hopefully one of the goals. So until next time, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.